I'm 56.
So this is for
56 and counting. Yeah.
So if you're listening to the show right now and maybe you're 50 or 60, maybe you're 70, older, and you have never got into running, like this is an example of someone who in his early 50s started running and at a higher level than he's ever done and now seems to really be enjoying it enough to now be on a podcast and being able to talk about his story. So I'd be curious, like, do you have any advice for someone who might be around your age?
Hello everyone, this is Sam Breiter and I'm the founder of Run Breiter, a digital running community meant to educate, motivate, and entertain beginner runners and runners who struggle with consistency. See all the mental and physical benefits running provides. I've been coaching runners both in person and digitally for 5 years, but have been running both competitively and casually for 14 years. The Run Breiter podcast gives me the opportunity to bring on guests to share their running journeys and running advice. I assure you, listening to this podcast will make you want to run and follow your journey, as the conversations in this episode will send signals to your mind that even when it's cold, you're sore, tired, or going through something, that a run is still well worth doing.
All right. Well, everyone, I appreciate you jumping on here to another episode in the Run Breiter podcast. Today we have Billy joining us. You may know him as I Run Chicago. He's huge on TikTok. He's on Instagram, and he comes up with some really cool content. I love the fact that on Mondays, you're always motivating everyone with never miss a Monday, but there's going to be a lot of cool stuff that I'm sure we'll talk about that regarding your running story that some people may know about, or maybe they don't. So that's really why we wanted to bring you on, to have you tell your story, provide some advice. But Billy, let me hand it to you. Would love to get like a little bit of an introduction about who you are, maybe what got you into running, and we'll kind of kick things off here today.
Okay. All right, Sam. Well, thanks for having me on. So I guess just a little bit of background about me is I've run I wasn't really a distance runner until 2019. I've always ran the Shamrock Shuffle, which is the kickoff to the Chicago running season. It's usually the end of March, first week of April, and I've ran that probably 15 or 16 times. And in 2019, I'm friends with some folks that put on the Chicago Marathon because I interfaced with them a lot when I was working for the city. And we had a conversation one day, and with one of my friends, Mike, and he was, we talked about me possibly running the marathon. So I hooked up with a running coach, Brendan Kernane is his name. He's Coach Brendan Running. He's a Chicago area coach. He's been with me since 2019. I ran a spring half marathon in 2019, and then I ran the Chicago Marathon in 2019 in the fall, and then I've been running ever since. I've run the Chicago Marathon 3 times. I'll be my 4th time this year in 23, and I've run 9 half marathons, and I'll be running my first half marathon with my daughter, who I'm currently training with, in 26 more days. So
Awesome.
Excited for that, and really the running community is dynamite. Anything I can do to give back, I'm all in it.
That's awesome, man. And thank you for sharing the background. Because I wasn't sure when you actually got into running, but at least distance running, because I know I've seen a lot of the different races that you've been doing and stuff like that. And yeah, I mean, you're still like only a few years into it, but it sounds like you've done so much in such a short period of time, which is really impressive. And you've connected with the community a lot. You're getting your family into running too, which is
Right.
cool. So kudos to you on all that. I'd be curious, first of all, I'm if I may ask this, and if we have to cut this part out, then I'm happy to, but how old are you, Billy, by the way?
I'm 56.
So this is for
56 and counting. Yeah.
So if you're listening to the show right now and maybe you're 50 or 60, maybe you're 70, older, and you have never got into running, like this is an example of someone who in his early 50s started running and at a higher level than he's ever done and now seems to really be enjoying it enough to now be on a podcast and being able to talk about his story. So I'd be curious, like, do you have any advice for someone who might be around your age who has never gotten into running, for someone who obviously has done it, such as yourself?
My advice would be, if you want to run. I've really gotten out of the point of when I first started running. It was hard. It was, I'm still not a fast runner, but I'm confident I can cover a marathon distance. I'm confident I can cover a half marathon distance. I like the challenge of training. I like the 18-week training plan for the marathon. For me, it's ideal, the Chicago Marathon, because my training really starts the first week of June. And as it ramps up, it gets hot in July and August. When I'm starting to peak out for those long run, those long LSD, long slow distance runs on weekends. But I enjoy them. Yeah, my advice, if you want to try to run, any type of distance, whether it's a 5K or a 10K or half marathon or a marathon, go for it. And you can, I mean, I'm proof that somebody who's just a casual runner doing a Shamrock Shuffle and a turkey trot, once a year, can really embrace running. But I think for me, my advice would be that if you want to get into it, you can get into it at any age. That's a fact.
That's great. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And so what shifted for you in 2019? Like what was the sign that you wanted to go ahead and start training for some of these longer races and ultimately do a marathon?
So, like I said, I just when I was talking to my friend Mike, he asked, why don't you run the marathon? And I was like, that's 26.2 miles. And I worked for the city, so I was interfacing with the marathon folks for basically the last 30 years of my career. So I was always on the other side of the barricades, assisting with city services. So I knew what the marathon entailed. Um, and I was out there watching those runners run, those folks, the back of the Packers who are struggling. And I'm like, kudos to those folks, because they are really, and with all the respect for the fast runners as well, but just to see the average Joe out there trying to tackle 26.2 really was kind of a motivator for me. And I felt that if I could do a half marathon, I could try to do a marathon. And that's basically how I got there. And don't let me, I'm not going to kid you. For me, it was a lot of work that first year, because I never had built a base, right? So I've done that. And since 2019, we ran through the pandemic, which was kind of interesting, like a lot of other cities and even, rural areas, was a little eerie, streets were closed. There was no traffic. I can remember one day during the pandemic when the city was pretty much on lockdown, running down LaSalle Street, which is the central financial district in Chicago, and you couldn't see a car. You'd literally run down the middle of the road,
Yeah. No, that's a really cool story. And yeah, I mean, I live in New York. I wasn't in New York, luckily, throughout the pandemic, because I feel like that would have been really challenging. But I've heard so many similar stories from other people where it's like, yeah, like during that period, it was definitely a different time. And a lot of people around that time started getting into running. But I'm glad for you now you can experience like the races and everything like that and all the community benefits of running too. But I know one thing that you said a little bit, early into that response was that the first year was a little challenging for you. And I think that anyone who's first getting into running or really anything new in life, there's always going to be those challenges. But looking back at it now, is there something that you wish you would have known going into that you would have implemented, that you would have thought would have perhaps helped your training? So if someone's sitting here, maybe they're around your age, maybe they're younger, maybe they're older, they're like, hey, I want to get into running. Like, what's something that could really allow them to get a jump start that you may have wished you knew going into it?
I think that for me, I really wish I would have understood and took those easy runs easy, because I didn't, and I still struggle with that. And for me, being new to running, meaning getting into the distance run training, all that terminology was new to me. Tempo runs, speed days, track workouts, threshold runs, all that stuff was overwhelming. And I finally, I've had my coach for 5 years, and I still at times don't always take the advice. And I know I'm better off if you hire somebody to be your coach, you should listen to them, because you hire them for a reason.
Yeah.
So my advice is just to listen to your coach, or listen to a training plan, whether you get that online or however you get it. And really, I wish, well, two things. One, I wish I would have really bought into that, go slow to go fast. I'll never be a speed demon. I'll never be a podium performance runner. but I enjoy the runs more now that I've been building that base. And the only other thing is I wish I would have got into running earlier. I wish I would have got into this when in my 20s,
Yeah.
because the running community is just absolutely amazing.
Yeah. So do you mind touching on that community, the benefits of the community? Like, what are some things in your life? Because I think someone who isn't actually part of what we like to call the running community, they don't really understand what that community is all about. So, like, what are some things that the community has done that you feel has changed your life? I'd be curious.
Well, I can say this, that when you get down to and this is my perspective, that when you get down to the core person of a runner, somebody who's dedicated to running, that, we all just have like that same mindset, right? It's like, it's a determination, it's a dedication. You follow a plan, you're disciplined. And I, it's almost like, I'm going to use TikTok as a good example. There's people who you may not even ever met in real life, and you have that connection with them. If, as crazy as it sounds, when we in 2022 for the Chicago Marathon, um, I did a party at my house. So it was basically, um, just from the traction on TikTok, you're seeing folks who are going to be running Chicago, right? So Jessica Galen, um, she's from North Carolina. Her and I had a little conversation. We decided we're going to do this party at my house. So we ended up pushing out hey, if you're interested, a couple of videos. If you're interested, we're going to have this get together, free beer, free pizza, free pasta, all the beverages. It'll be a get together, a run talk meetup at my house, not knowing anybody before they showed up, like me having met in real life. And we had a great turnout. We had, I think, throughout the night, probably somewhere between, 40 and 80 people with their families. I mean, these people are showing up. I mean, think about this. You're inviting strangers from the internet into your house for a party. But it was a great time. A lot of the runners, several runners that you've had on your podcast were at the party. We had a great time. We're doing it again this year. And it's the running community is amazing. You can really, there's just a connection. I don't know how to explain it. It just really is a good connection you have with people when you meet them. The folks you meet online in the running community, when you meet them in real life, they are the same as you imagine them.
Yeah. No, that's a really cool story. I didn't realize that you did that last year. I mean, I didn't run the Chicago Marathon, so I may have heard about it and I was like, oh, I'm not running this. But that's really, really cool and really special that you were able to do that. Really selfless of you as well. Like not a lot of people would be willing to just advertise something like that on social media. Obviously, I'm sure there was some costs involved with all the beer, pizza and pasta, but I'm sure like you made so many great friends through this that are long-term friends. And I think what goes around comes around, right? So like there's going to be other people who are going to want to do things like this because of you putting together an event like that. So like
It was a great event. The time was perfect. I live basically 10 minutes from the expo hall. So we planned it on Friday at like 5:30, right when the expo closed. So people who were in town went to the expo. It would be an easy access to my house. And yeah, it was a great time, and that really formed some really good friendships. And in fact, Milo Underestimated, who's from Auckland, New Zealand, he came into town, and I'm actually hosting him at my house this year. He'll be spending his time in Chicago at my house instead of a hotel room downtown.
that's awesome. Yeah, we know how expensive those hotel rooms can be right before a race. So really nice of you to be willing to do that too. Something I'd be curious about, taking a little bit of a step back. I know that you mentioned you obviously work with a coach right now, and something that you do before like marathons, for example, is that 18-week training build. And you described yourself as not a speed demon, but you're still completing a feat that, as our friend Magic Mile Mike likes to say, only 1% of people will ever do in life. So you're doing a lot of things right. And, I'd be really curious to hear, like, What does your training look like specifically? Because I think for someone who, is focused on just like that completion aspect of it, and they want to get themselves into shape over an 18-week period, they could probably learn something from this. You don't have to break down like the full like week by week plan, but just like a quick general overview, I think could be really helpful for anyone who might want to try a challenge like this for themselves.
Right. So the training plan that I'll be running, I'll be starting June 5th, which is the day after that half marathon that I'm doing with my daughter. That's when my training starts, and it'll be cross training, uh, 1 day a week. It'll be strength training 2 days a week, and running 6 days a week. The weekends are my long runs. Um, Obviously, there's a progressive buildup, right, on the weekly miles. I haven't seen that plan yet from my coach. I'll get that probably in another couple weeks. He adjusts it based on as I advance further, so my mileage can be higher. Uh, the mileage for me isn't super high. I think I'll peak out at my peak week probably around 55, maybe 60 miles. I'll do a 20-mile run. That'll be my max, like most runners do, at least the average runner. And then once that taper starts in September, there's a half marathon that actually runs on part of Lakeshore. Actually runs on most of Lakeshore Drive on the south end. So that's a couple weeks before the marathon. So that's built into my taper. So it's kind of like I don't run that to race it. I just use it as one of my tapering long runs. So I am going to focus more on some strength training stuff. I do that probably like 3 days a week. It doesn't take much time. It's just more injury prevention, especially for a guy like me as you get older. But I know that it pays dividends because I recover quicker, and I'm not having those muscle IT band issues, which I used to struggle with all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and I appreciate the perspective on what the training looks like, and that the fact that you're incorporating strength training, I truly believe that is really important, especially for injury prevention. Have you seen over the last 4 years, since you've been taking running to obviously that next level, any sort of injuries or anything like that? I'd be really curious.
I have. So in 2021, I was having some uh, IT band issues, and again, that was a direct relation for me from not doing those stretching, not doing the cross training type stuff that I should be doing. Like I mentioned earlier, it's not a whole lot of time. It could be 15 minutes a day, whatever, 20 minutes a day. Sometime like before I came on with you, I did like a 45 minutes strength and conditioning session at the gym that I go to. Because I know I don't want to have those issues. So I had some IT band issues, and then I had a knee issue last year, but that was a self-induced issue. I was down by the lakefront, and there's these around the planetarium, which kind of circles part of the lakefront. There's some pretty big, I don't know how I describe it, like concrete blocks that are there. There's stairs there for a reason to use the stairs,
Mhm.
and I didn't. I jumped off these boulders, and I'm only 5'8", and those boulder, it's not something I should be jumping off of, and I kind of jammed my knee. Um, but that was self-induced, and I went and seen an ortho, a really good one at Northwestern. It was referred to me by some of the marathon folks here, and I got an injection in my knee, and it's been good ever since. And I don't jump off those rocks anymore.
Yeah, I get nervous myself, even like, just jumping off any surfaces while I'm running. I'll see that a little bit in New York City where there's like some steps, but like, yeah, I think definitely got to play it safe, especially with all the miles that we're both putting on. So I'm glad to hear, obviously, that you recovered from the injury. And it's good to hear like what you did to get yourself to that point and what you're doing now to be proactive to prevent any future injuries. So wishing you.
And I had a foot injury. It was not a stress fracture, but it was after they did an MRI, they felt that I probably had a stress fracture earlier in the summer, and I may have ran on it and it just healed. Um, but after the marathon in 2021, I was running Dallas, a half marathon, And there was a 7-week period where there was no running involved because I was trying to heal that foot. So I basically did rowing. I rowed and rowed and rowed just on the rower at the gym for 7 weeks, and I lost zero cardio. And I was able to run Dallas. It wasn't I wasn't racing Dallas. That was just kind of like to it was my coach and my physical therapist and the doctor said you can go run it but don't race it. If you want to run it to do a run walk to participate, we encourage you to do that. And but that was with the caveat that I didn't do any running for the 7 weeks prior to that. So that's when I see people post on some of these social media platforms about, hey, they can't run. What should they do? I so much endorse rowing. It's a non-weight bearing exercise, and you can really keep your cardio up with that.
Yeah, no, that's really good advice. And yeah, I mean, I just had you probably met her recently actually, but maybe previously Colt Dane, who on my
Yeah,
podcast a couple episodes ago, and she like was a rower in college and is now a really good runner. So it's something that I think you can do while you run to like improve your cardio. If you have a running injury, then rowing, I agree, like that's a great thing to keep your cardio
absolutely.
up. So yeah, really appreciate you sharing that story. Definitely helpful for people who might get injured and aren't able to run. So I definitely appreciate that. But yeah, I mean, something that I'd be curious about too. I know for you, you mentioned that you wish you got into running when you were younger, but you really are grateful for all the community benefits that have came with running. Outside of those community benefits, because I'm sure there's many other benefits that you enjoy within running. What has running done to like change your life? Could be about like physical benefits, mental benefits, anything like that. But I know everyone kind of has a different story with that.
There's both physical and mental benefits. Mentally, it's a great outlet for stress. Um, the physical benefits are obvious. They're the ability to get around as you get older. You get your blood pressure under control and you get your cholesterol in check. You're more health conscious. But for me, it's really um, I've really been able to. I retired a year ago, so I'm able to spend a lot of time running. I don't have to worry about building my training program around a work lifestyle, right? Because I'm retired, so I can do those things now. Um, and the biggest benefit outside of the first benefit is the running community in general, meeting wonderful people. But definitely the second one for me would probably be more mental than physical. The mental clarity, because when I go out there um, to go on whether it's a 5 mile run or an 18, 19, 20 mile long run, it's like tunnel vision. It's like I tune everything out. You could turn away any issues that are going on in your life and get away from it and just be with yourself in the outdoors, wherever that is. For me it's the lakefront. It's a lakefront every time I run. Um, and yeah, the mental part is definitely the bigger benefit for me than the physical part.
Yeah, no, that's great to hear, of course, because I think a lot of people choose to exercise often because of physical benefits, but we really can certainly underestimate the mental benefits. And I think for you too, like it's a cool story. Like you obviously, I don't know everything about your life and your calendar and everything like that, but you obviously have probably a little bit more time than the average person who is working a
Right.
full-time job. And I think for me, like if I was retired, like not having something like running, for example, would make me go crazy. And I'm sure it gives you like that fulfillment and purpose, allows you to clear your mind and like enjoy the moment a little bit. Would you say so? You feel that way?
Absolutely. I can tell you this much. So I've been retired, about a year and 4 or 5 months. If I didn't have running, I don't know what I'd be doing. I mean, really, it's so good when the weather's good. Don't get me wrong. I was fortunate to spend uh, February, March in Arizona, so I was able to run there. But I don't know the routes. I can leave my house. I live 5 minutes from the lakefront, right? So I can get to the lakefront and I know the miles. I don't I could almost I know if I'm gonna run 10 miles or 15 miles a day where my starting point is and where I'm turning around at.
Yeah.
So yeah, if I didn't, I don't know what I'd be doing if I didn't have running when I'm retired.
either like, I feel like everyone's either gonna run or play golf or something like that. But I'm glad you found your passion for sure in running. And yeah, I'm sure you'll just continue to enjoy it with the time that you have. I'd be curious though, Billy, like, and there's no pressure on this question. I think everyone has their different reasons for running, and you don't have to have this necessarily to be a runner or a part of the community. But I always like to ask people, are there any like big plans that you have with running or any goals as you look into the future? It sounds like a lot of like the races that you've done are like local in the Chicago area. So I don't know if there's like any plan to like do any other unique races or change the distance at all or like a goal time. But I'd be really curious, like, is there anything like that you have lined up for yourself?
So I would, so the half marathons have been pretty much local, with the exception of I've done Dallas twice.
Oh, cool.
I ran Kenosha, Wisconsin once. As far as marathons go, it'll probably just be the Chicago Marathon. I like that race. It's my hometown race. Um, I am nervous before every race, whether it's the Shamrock Shuffle or a marathon or a half marathon. And my coach says, my coach has run 100 marathons on all 7 continents, and he says he still gets nervous before races.
Mhm.
So if you weren't nervous, something would be wrong. With that being said, the advantage for me running a race in Chicago, especially a marathon, is much more. There's less stress on me, right? Because I live here and I wake up in my own bed, and I'm 15 minutes from the start line. I know how to get there. Would I like to do another marathon somewhere? Probably. New York, I think, would be kind of cool. Um, I really like the half marathon distance for me, because I can race a half marathon. I really can't race a marathon. It's a big one for me. Um, but I've so what I like the half marathon distance. I'm glad my daughter's running this one with me. So our goals for this one is for her to finish. Um, so I'm not we're running together. I'm not looking to run faster than her. My daughter's 28 years old. Her name is Samantha. She's been doing an outstanding job running. But I wouldn't want to have to uh, have her run my race or my pace, which isn't fast, but I'm seasoned enough that I know how to have a game plan in place, right? I know how I'm going to run the first 3 miles, the next 3 miles, and so on and so forth. So I think that after this half marathon, then I'll look. I'm going to look at a couple other half marathons to race during the summer, because I kind of like the idea of getting faster. Again, I'm not a fast runner, but I've run 9 half marathons, and I've got faster in every one of them, with the exception of the one I did in Dallas when I was coming off that foot injury. So I kind of like the challenge. I think for me, I like the challenge of being able to manage it better on the race. My nutrition on the course. I can tell you how crazy it is. Where, as a new runner, going back to 2019, when my friend Mike, who works for the Chicago Marathon, had talked to me, not far before the marathon start, like maybe a month or so before, and he asked me how my nutrition plan was.
Yeah.
And I was like, Mike, I'm not a real good eater anyway. I don't, I was thinking he was talking about, like, am I eating salads during the week? He was talking about my nutrition on the course.
Mhm.
So I've learned from that, and I've got that dialed in pretty well now. And I know what happens if I don't take my nutrition properly on the course. I experienced it last year. Um, I ran the last year's marathon by myself, uh, and I didn't. I was so caught up in the crowds that I didn't take any. Normally my nutrition and my gel intake is based on time, not miles or distance. And I know that at about an hour and 15, hour and 20, and I need to take one. And I didn't take any for like 2 hours and like 15 minutes, and I was in trouble. Yeah, so it was. I won't make that mistake again.
Yeah, so I'd be curious on that. In an ideal world, I know you mentioned that you normally take your nutrition, your gels, an hour and 15 minutes through the race. I think like many beginner runners don't really know like what their nutrition should look like within a race. Not going to hold you to like explaining everything about nutrition, but like what have you found to be the most successful for you personally as far as fueling up throughout a race?
So for me, if we're talking, whether it's a half marathon or a marathon, it's still that first gel for me at the hour and 15-minute mark. My go-to is UCAN strawberry banana is my favorite. Um, when it comes to the race day, the aid stations, I alternate every other station. Water at one, Gatorade at the next, or whatever formula they're passing out. Um, and then I just try to be mindful that when I'm taking that UCAN at the hour and 15-minute mark, if it's during a race situation, I'll make sure that I'm not taking Gatorade following it up minutes later. I'll make sure that there's some space between it. Um, so I'll do for the half marathon distance, I can really get by with two UCANs. Uh, the marathon, I'd probably use four, and
Okay.
maybe not use that fourth one. Um, like I said, the as long as I'm alternating the Gatorade and the water every other aid station, I'm in pretty good shape. Except for when I forget to take it, like I did last year. I just got caught up in the crowds, and it was really strange because it was probably at about mile when I got to like my family was waiting for me at like mile 21, and a friend of mine, Ben, uh, who he had a bib to run, but he had some issues and he couldn't do it. But his plan was to meet me at mile 21 or 22 and run with me the last, uh, basically almost to the finish line, and then peel off. And when he met me there, he could just see I was disoriented. Um, and I was dehydrated. So he literally, and his whole point with me was he didn't want me to stop running. There was no stopping at the aid stations. So he actually ran the last 4.5 miles of that race carrying a jug of water with a
Wow.
Gatorade cup. And we just, but I couldn't, I was in, I got to the point where I screwed up on my nutrition. I was dehydrated, and no matter how much water I was taking in, I wasn't getting out from underneath it. So
Yeah.
it was a grind the last, 4.5, 5 miles.
Well, I appreciate you sharing the story. I think it's like a good lesson for someone who might be new to running. Like dehydration, like it can really negatively affect you throughout a race. So I'm sure you could speak to this, but like, would you, like, as far as you figuring out like what the right system is for you, did you figure this out through training? Did you just follow the lead of like what your coach had given you to know that moving forward, like what is a good fueling plan to avoid the feeling of dehydration through that race?
Yeah, so it was a lot of it's through trial and error. A lot of it I picked up on my training runs throughout the summer.
Mhm.
Um, if you're an early morning runner, which I'm not, um, you're in a great position if you live in Chicago and you run the lakefront. So CARA, the Chicago Area Runners Association, sets up hydration stations along the lakefront during marathon training season. And they're out there early in the morning, and they're there till like 10 o'clock in the morning.
That's
And there's
nice.
Gatorade at these strategic locations. I'll go out there early in the morning if it's going to be a 90-degree day, but I'm not a morning runner. So for me, it was just trial and error, being out on the lakefront running. No, and just, but don't get me wrong, I didn't learn that in a year. It probably took me two years of running. I can say now that I've got my nutrition and hydration down pat, provided I don't. It was just a miscue at that last race. I've never done that before.
Yeah.
Um, but it was so I've learned from that. And more importantly, I think for me, the hydration and I don't worry about the hydration and the carb loading unless I'm running a marathon. And for me, what I've worked with my coach and my trainer on is the carb loading. The race is on Sunday. The carb loading doesn't start Friday night. It really starts for me Wednesday.
Mhm.
It's a slow, gradual buildup of carbs, um, and really, taking in some serious fluids leading up to race day. Um, and it's for me, I can tell the difference when I'm fueled properly.
Definitely makes a lot of sense. And yeah, again, thank you so much for sharing like the perspective and like what you've done to see success overall. Obviously, that one slip up, like it happens for sure. But yeah, I mean, I appreciate the context on that. Now something I'd be curious about too. Obviously, the reason that you're sitting here today with me, I'd like to think is because of the fact that you're obviously creating content and content that I really enjoy and that many others enjoy. What actually led to you to decide to, I don't know if you first started on TikTok or Instagram or maybe a different platform, but what motivated you to begin the content journey with running?
So it was really TikTok is like my main platform because for me it's easy to do, right? It's not, I don't put a whole lot of thought in my content. You talk about Magic Mile Mike, love Mike, I love Mike's content. And there's a lot of folks that'll put a lot of time into it. Mine's just I'm winging it. I'm out on the lakefront. I'm snapping my videos. I try to. I think one of the things I try to do is show people who don't live here how great the lakefront really is. Um, there was one point last year where I put a TikTok out there. Listen, if there's something you want to see in the city, let me know, and I'll run by it. And I had some people wanted to see the beans, some wanted to see Navy Pier, and I did those things. It was kind of, and I tagged those individuals who requested those locations. Um, so I think that I got into it really probably for a lot, like a lot of other people during the pandemic. It just kind of soared, right? It just there was we had nothing to do, right? And I was when I first got into doing the TikToks, a lot of them were like still photos. I wasn't sure how to do the video thing, and I've kind of pieced it together. And I think that I hope that my content makes some people happy.
Definitely does.
I know that my Monday's a big deal for me. I've always been a never miss a Monday guy. It's a great way to start the week, even after a long run on a Saturday or Sunday. Um, and it's I look forward to it. I think the amount of people who I engage with. Milo and I had a conversation last night where we were talking about how I want to know about these people I engage with, right? I want to know how they're doing. I want to know how they fuel, how they run. You want to know more about the people as individuals, and it's this platform has allowed me to do that, and connecting with people. Um, that you How would you connect with them if you weren't on social media? I guess just running on the lakefront, you can hang out with run clubs. There's a couple clubs in Chicago that I run with a few times. The reason I'm not consistent with them is they're just too far from me.
Mhm.
Lakeview Run Club is up on the north side. This girl Kayla Jane, she runs that organization. She does a great job. And then there's the Midway Mile Chasers, and they're out by Midway Airport. It's not close, but I try to get out there with those folks a couple times a year. But to
Yeah.
answer your question, where it really took off was during the pandemic, where we were right. We weren't seeing a whole lot of people, right? We were on lockdown, and that's kind of how it got started. And it just then I went from basically just having still photos of like whatever was going on to doing some videos. And I think that I didn't want to. I'm not in this thing to. I'm not in it to be really. I wasn't going into this to be a content creator, right? I wanted to go out there to do something that's fun to kind of document where I'm at, right? So I can see how I progress and some of the things that I've done. And as a bonus along that way, I've met a boatload of people who are just super genuinely incredible individuals.
Yeah. That's an awesome answer, man. And like, it just shows the power of social media and the community that we have in running and the connection that you've been able to make with people. I know I've made a lot of great connections too. And I'm sure like as the years come, like that level of connection is only going to increase. Those opportunities are going to only be more and more. Like I always get so excited when someone like new jumps on the platform and starts creating about running. Cause I'm like, who knows like what type
Right.
of relationship we could build with this person. Like this is so exciting and so cool. So yeah, I'm glad it's something that you look forward to. I'm glad it's something that you enjoy and that like it keeps you going. And what you're talking about too, the fact that it documents your journey, like that's half of the thing that's so cool too for me. It's like to look back a year ago or 2 years ago and see like where you were, and now you're like, wow, look at me now. Like that's a really fulfilling thing. And it can also be a sample for others to like see like what's possible, towards like to see like, okay, this is where Billy was back in 2021. Look at him now. Like that's a really cool way to do that. So that's awesome. And everyone should definitely follow you, man. I know your page is I Run Chicago, but is there any like special shout outs you want to do to any other social media? I know you're on TikTok and Instagram. Are you anywhere else? I don't believe.
No, I just on Instagram I'm the real I Run Chicago.
Okay.
Because that's all I can get. And I just love interacting with folks. And there's nothing I like more than people who are coming to Chicago and they'll DM me or call me and they'll either want to run or know where to go. And that's cool. And meeting people that you've met online that are into running is like the greatest thing in the world. When I was in Arizona, I ended up meeting up with Heidi and Carolyn, who are both from the Phoenix area, and never met them before. And all of a sudden, I met them at a race. They met me there, and we've done some hiking together. And they're just great individuals, as well as a boatload of people from the Midwest here that I've met.
That's so great. Well, yeah, I mean, the next time I go to Chicago, you're definitely going to be one of the first people that I reach out to go on a run and see in person, man. It would be awesome. And, I live in New York City now, but I don't know if you heard, I am moving to Denver next month. So
nice.
Definitely, if you're in the area, let me know. Would love to get together and just
go for sure.
Whatever it might be, man.
And you have your host here in Chicago. So the invites here, just show up. I got a place for you to stay, and we'll show you around.
That's really appreciated. Well, any final words for the listeners, Billy? Anything you want to leave everyone with before we hop off for today?
No, other than, just if you find something you like, and if that's running, just go after it. Go do it. And the most important thing I say is have fun. Don't make it a job. Don't make it a chore. Go out there, because as long as you have fun, it'll keep you coming back.
That's amazing. I love that. Definitely a great way to view life and view your passion. So thank you so much for sharing that and for everything here. This was a really enjoyable episode, a really special one, I truly believe. And I'm so glad that I invited you on and that you were willing to spend some time here at the Run Breiter podcast.
Yeah. Great seeing you, Sam. Thank you.
Awesome.